Good morning, everyone. So nice to have you all here this morning and those who are out there streaming us. Welcome to the UUCGT, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Grand Traverse, and to our service today with Wendy von Courter, our community minister for social justice, who will be speaking on Why Church. I'm Susan Smith, the coordinator of this service and a member of the Sunday Services Committee. We are glad to have you with us, whether in person or streaming from home. On our order of service, you will note our land acknowledgement, a request to silence electronic devices, and a notice about the book at the front of our sanctuary in which you can record your joys and concerns and or light a candle of commemoration as you prefer. For those of you who stream from home, usually your joys and concerns can be submitted from home in advance, but as I read online last night, not over the summer. So please, if you're not here in person, send them by somebody else. Ann Swaney, a member of the Congregational Care Team, will read what you choose to share a little later in the service. We are a welcoming congregation and are different from one another in many ways. For example, to name a few, in religious backgrounds and beliefs, in gender identities and sexual orientations, and in the structures of our family. We welcome you in all of your authenticity to our beloved community. We are enriched by your presence. If you are new to our congregation or haven't been here for a while and are willing and able, you may stand to introduce yourself. Someone will bring you a microphone, which will enable even those at home to hear your introduction. However, please feel free to remain seated and silent if you prefer. Is there anyone who would like to introduce themselves today? Yes. Wait for the mic, it's coming.
I'll let my daughter go first.
Hello, I'm Juliana Frost. I'm from UUCEL, which is in Jackson County. We are visiting today, and I'll let Dad introduce where he's from. We will be moving up to Traverse City in August, so we are thrilled to be here.
Yeah, nice.
I'm Frank Swinehart, guilty, from UUCC, Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Cleveland. My daughter has a position up here, so she says, why don't you come? So we'll be moving in August.
Wow. Welcome to our community and to our congregation. Anyone else?
My name is Sheila Hobbs, and I'm a friend of Susan Leo's, and I'm visiting from Medford, Oregon. And let's see, Traverse City reminds me of where I grew up in Kalispell, Montana, for the weather and for the climate and for the beautiful trees you have.
Welcome, Sheila. Anyone else? Thank you. For our social hour following services, we have designated yellow mugs for those who we haven't met previously or seen lately. This will allow a personal and gradual introduction into our community, so people will find you more easily if you use a yellow mug. If you don't want them to find you, there's one small change in the order of service today. The reading will be shared by Wendy von Courter. It is her favorite reading and most appropriate for her to deliver it to our congregation. Let us turn our attention now to our centering music, Moving On, composed and performed by Amanda Mangiardi.
Good morning. And come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all of your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here, we need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who we are and are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, and the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together we make it a holy place.
The chalice lighting words this morning are my own and reflect a spirit of the gift of renewal, which is June's Soul Matters theme. Here, every Sunday morning, we unite as kindred spirits in our shared ideals, a belief in love, justice, diversity, freedom, compassion, equity, and the sacred dignity of all of life. I ask you to consider the possibility that Sunday morning at the UUCGT is when and where we find the gift of renewal. Now, Wendy will sound the singing bowl, calling us into our sacred time together. I invite you into a contemplative state, listening to its melodic tone as it dissipates into silence.
And I brought my own bowl today because I have a certain love of this singing bowl.
That also is a gift of renewal, isn't it? Please rise in body or spirit as we are led by Anne-Marie Jones, accompanied by Bill Haggard on guitar. The opening hymn, number 298, is in the gray hymnal.
Giving my young friends want to come up and join me up front? Exciting. Hello, hello. I'm happy to see you this morning. This morning we're talking a little bit about why do we come to church? What is church important? Why is church important to us? And for me, I think the most important thing about church for me since I was very little has always been that it's a place to belong and it's a place to know that I am loved. And so I thought today is our last day of RE until the new school year. We have the summer off, and I thought a good way to send us off would be just a book about love. And I do not have slides this morning, so we're going to do this the old school way, and I have my pictures right here. The slide up there is pretty cute. That's pretty adorable. Has Anyone Said I Love You? Written by Ed Poppiel, aka Mrs. Kasha Davis, for any of our RuPaul's Drag Race fans out there. Has anyone said I love you? Has anyone said I love you? Did you hear those words today? Has anyone said I love you? I meant it when I say, good morning, Max. Are you ready for a walk? I love your laughs and smiles, even your scratchy face, the way you always listen when my thoughts are in a race. The way you laugh and joke, oh my, or even sit and cry. Has anyone said I love you? And that's the reason why. It's okay to cry. Look how big you are. Thank you for being a good dog today. Would you like a treat? Ellie wants a treat. We're going to have a treat later. Love grows most when it is shared, but love begins inside. You must embrace the you are to share love far and wide. Even in the darkness, lit only by a star, your spirit will be shining, shining near and far. Just pick up any mirror and know that love's in you. When you feel love blossom, there's nothing you can't do. Now take your love and hold it. No matter where you go, remember when you share it, love grows and grows and grows. And if you ever lose it, oh no, he lost his balloon. It's right above your nose. When we love ourselves, everything is possible. Love, Mr. and Mrs. Davis. All right, my friends, I think we're going to go make a treat. Are we ready? All right, let's go. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Children's benediction.
Go in joy, go in peace to meet the day. With open hearts embrace life's wonder. We will guide you, we will love you on your way.
Now is the time of our offering, when you so generously give week after week to support the congregation and community needs in the Traverse City area, where among the plenty, there is also those in need. Please note that your checks may be earmarked on the memo line as to whether they are to count toward your pledge and the needs of the congregation or for community needs. If you are watching at home, you may give, as described in the slides, via the Vanco Giving app, the UUCGT website, by check, or by pre-arrangement with a bank for an automatic debit monthly that goes directly into the UUCGT account. However you give, You may always designate your gift as you wish for the congregation or for community needs. Let us now enjoy the meditation music, Rhythms of Life, composed and played by Amanda Mangiardi during the collection of our offering.
Now is the time set aside in our service when we name and honor the joys and concerns that mark our lives, the milestones and moments of our lived experiences. I will be sharing the joys and concerns that were offered up for us to hold in our hearts as we are gathered. If you have a joy or concern that is a bit too tender or raw to share in our service, in Reverend Alex's absence, I invite you to reach out to a member of the congregational care team. Barb Hansen, raise your hand, and she has the shawl there. Or to simply light a candle to honor your heart's concerns as you are held in the love that is gathered here. None of us was ever meant to travel life's journey alone. This is what has been offered up to share this morning. From Susan Smith. Bill Scharf took a fall the other day. ER told him he had a fracture of his left shoulder and that he likely would need a shoulder replacement. He lives alone and may need help, although he says he doesn't. with activities of daily living, food prep, dishes, laundry, shopping, driving to appointments, showers, etc. He will call for an appointment with a specialist tomorrow, and then we'll know more. And from Phyllis Jessup, please hold in your hearts Case Sturgeon, a former long-term member of this congregation who is currently in a rehab center in Portland, Oregon, recovering from open heart surgery. Now let us hold a moment of silence for the joys and concerns that remain in the silence of our hearts.
Of course, come.
Susan Smith mentioned as I came in here today, there were 5 candles already lighted that people here, it's important that you know there's others in this congregation that care enough to have written those candles, and those people will be held in our hearts also.
I'd like to offer these words from Wendell Berry. Maybe they'll find a home in your heart and soul as you journey through times of beauty, but also despair. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives might be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
Would you please join with me in singing Spirit of Life? Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
It may not be exactly my favorite poem. This poem is by Patrick Murfin, who is a carpenter full-time and a involved member of his congregation in Illinois the rest of the time. And he writes, "We have seen the great cathedrals, stone laid upon stone, carved and cared for by centuries of certain hands. Seen the slender minarets soar from dusty streets to raise the cry of faith to the one and only God. Seen the placid pagodas where gilded Buddhas squat amid the temple bells and incense. We have seen the tumbled temples, half buried in the sands, choked with verdant tangles, sunk in coraled seas, old truths, toppled and forgotten. We have even seen the wattled huts, the sweat lodge hogans, the wheeled yurts, and the ice age caverns where unwritten worship raised its knowing voices. But here, we build temples in our hearts. Side by side, we gather. We mix the mortar of the scattered dust of the Holy of Holies with the sacred water of the Ganges. Lay Moorish alabaster on the blocks of Angkor Wat and rough-hewn Stonehenge slabs. Plumb Doric columns for strength of reason, square them with stern Protestant planks, and illuminate all with Chartres jeweled windows and the brilliant lamps of science. Yes, here we build temples in our hearts. Side by side we come, scavenging the ages for wisdom, cobbling together as best we may the stones of 1,000 altars, leveling with doubt, framing with skepticism, sinking firm foundations in the earth as we reach for the heavens. Here, we build temples in our hearts, a temple for each heart, a village of temples, none shading another, connected by well-worn paths, built alike on sacred ground.
I was passed a note asking me to mention also all the people suffering in the last few days as temperatures soon soared to 100 degrees and above. And one state where disaster was declared where only rooftops and treetops could be seen above the water. We are not lacking, are we, when it comes to despair in our country and our world. And so, I'm going to return to the chalice for a minute because one of my favorite chalice lightings is from Albert Schweitzer. He said, "At times our own light goes out and is rekindled from a spark from another, by a spark from another person, and each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us." So I invite you to take a moment now, close your eyes if you'd like to, or lose your gaze, and think with that sort of gratitude of someone who has rekindled that flame within you. My person today is the Reverend Canon Anthony Cardova Campbell. Reverend Campbell was not a Unitarian Universalist, but he was a man of faith, a Baptist preacher raised in the black church culture where one went to church on a Sunday and finished up sometime on Wednesday. Aren't you kind of glad you chose Unitarian Universalism? He had international creds, preaching in Methodist, Episcopal, and congregational settings, and because one student may have begged him and promised to bake for him a humble Unitarian Universalist church in Massachusetts. His accomplishments were many, too many to list, including being one of the earliest members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I came to know him while preparing for ministry at Boston University School of Theology. He was the professor of homiletics. He quickly became an important mentor and perhaps stands as one of the most influential mentors in my life. He taught me that you preach to 10 the same way you preach to 10,000, and he had a small church near Boston and Westminster Abbey. He said too many pastors focus on growth in terms of numbers of people in the pews rather than growth in spiritual maturity and relationships, which can happen anywhere people of faith gather and act. He taught me about the importance of testimony, that naming how your faith was present, how you experienced the divine, however you understood it, how you knew it, what it taught you, how you were changed, and what you did with that changed self for the betterment of our world. He taught us all these things in class, and to be ready always. It was a little bit frightening. For any moment, he might point at you and say, "Would you offer us a prayer?" And the answer you just knew could not be, "No, could I do it tomorrow?" But Tony led even more by example. Picture this scene. We're in the beautiful chapel at Boston University where Howard Thurman served as dean from 1953 to 1965 while advising Martin Luther King Jr. Tony had invited a guest to preach, and he and others were sitting in the large chancel in front of everybody. And there was some noise at the back of this majestic chapel where people came in. And a man had come in off of the city street, and he was very noisy because he was carrying several trash bags. One or more sounded as if they had been filled of cans that he had collected. Reverend Campbell rises, and while the service continues, he quietly makes his way to the rear of the chapel. He shares some words with the man. Then he returns to his spot in the chancel after assisting the man and helping him carry the bags to a seat that was closer to the front so that he might feel part of the gathered community. I don't remember who was preaching. And Tony Campbell brought in some magnificent guest preachers. But that day, the sermon was delivered in that moment. But the most important lesson that I learned from him took place in a story that unfolded over several days and is particularly present with me today, over 2 decades later. During a break in class one afternoon, I raced over the student union for a coffee, getting a breath of fresh air on the way. It was my survival routine. I'd call it a spiritual practice, but I don't think anybody would really buy that. As I headed back to class through the hallways, I encountered several tables that were lined up on one side of this very large hallway outside of the union. There, Jewish students were displaying horrific pictures from what came to be known as the Passover bombing. This was in March of 2002. On the 27th of that month, around 250 guests at the Park Hotel in Netanya were gathered for the annual Passover Seder. A 25-year-old Palestinian man entered the dining room carrying a suitcase. He then detonated the explosive in the suitcase. 28 people were killed instantly. 140 were injured, 20 severely, 2 of them then died. Some of the victims were Holocaust survivors. I was late to class because I could not walk by without looking at the horrific, I won't describe them, the horrific, you've seen them now more recently, horrific images, but also the deeply wounded eyes of the young people standing with that display. The next day, I noticed a police presence on the campus and didn't really think much about it because I was focused on running over to the student union to get my coffee to make it through my day. So I got my quick breath of air and my dash for the coffee. But this time, when I left the cafe, there were the same students, the same faces, the same horrific images on the right side of the hallway. But on the left were other tables, other images, and other sad, traumatized eyes. These were the Palestinian students. The images and the depth of sadness in their eyes indistinguishable from their fellow students on the other side of this hallway. Hamas claimed responsibility for the attack. A spokesman stated that this was an attempt to send a letter, to send a message to all the world that we are trying to fight for our own freedom against a terrorist government in Israel. Another said, as long as there is an occupation, there will be a resistance. I tell you now, more than 20 years later, I can still bring the horrific images to my mind. They kept me up all night on both sides of the hall, and the eyes of the students, Palestinians and Jews. I was late to class again. But that evening after class, I delivered myself to Reverend Campbell's office, and with tears in my eyes, I asked him, what do you do with this as a religious leader, as a person of faith? He listened to me. We spoke some. Then he seemed almost lost in his own thoughts as he gazed off and said, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time that I call Jesse and we gather our leaders. Maybe it's time that he and I and others walk arm in arm through Jerusalem, knowing that some of us might not return. We talked more. We prayed. And I offer my testimony that I was forever changed. That moment would lead me to a lengthy relationship with civil disobedience and protest work nationally and locally. Work that as a religious leader, as a person of faith, particularly as a person of this faith, I cannot turn away from, even when the costs are high because the stakes are higher. Now, Reverend Campbell did enjoy dropping names, but he had them to drop. He was referring to Jesse Jackson. But I'm also sure he had his number on his cell phone, and Jesse would pick up the phone, as would Peter Gomes, and were they alive, Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King Jr. Sadly, Reverend Campbell had a stroke later that year and died 3 days after that stroke. So what does this mean to us in this faith in these times? And is church dying? That's a conversation that's happening across this country in clergy circles and in all sorts of discussion areas. Is Unitarian Universalism dying? Is religious life a relic soon to be remembered fondly or otherwise by us as we all age? Why be part of an organized religion? Now, there's so many positive things that we can say about why it's important that our congregations exist. I read a story a Unitarian Universalist friend posted on Facebook this past week. A single mom of a young daughter relocated to a small town in Colorado and rented a room from an older woman. The older woman asked if she was going to bring her daughter to church and proceeded to tell her where the Baptist, Methodist, and Congregational churches were located. After a few weeks, the older woman noticed that on Sunday mornings they had been dressing up and going out. Out of curiosity, she asked the young mother what church she had decided on. The mother said that she would be going to the UU church that had been very welcoming. And the older woman responded, "Oh, those Unitarians, all they want to do is be nice to each other and make the world a better place." The post then said, "True story." Now, two things for me are immediately suspect. The proclamation that it's a true story, and the fact that UUs would dress up for church. But it's believable, isn't it? It's an aspect of Unitarian Universalism that, while imperfect, is notable and something that hopefully we strive to increase and get better at our welcome. And there are so many other positive stories. For 14 years at my parish in Marblehead, Massachusetts, I greeted parishioners outside of church as they arrived. I always ask newcomers, well, what brought you out today? Having been birthed into the faith, I'm third and fifth generation, I always was curious, what made you decide on this day to come? For some, it was the rainbow flag. For others, it was the Black Lives Matter banner. And some would tell me they'd been working up the courage for days or months or even years, and finally decided that today was the day they needed to come. Some began coming after a spouse died, not because of grief, although I'm sure grief was present, but because for those other years, they went to that other person's church. Some had been harmed by the religion of their upbringing. Some said they needed a safe community to be who they were or who one or more of their children were authentically. Each stated that they were so glad we were there. One woman who had been coming for years told me that my hug was the only physical contact she had all week other than for medical purposes. She was very glad we were here. Our congregations have physically and spiritually provided sanctuary for conscientious objectors during the Vietnam War, for the undocumented in the midst of a racist and inhumane immigration system, safe haven for our LGBTQI+ siblings, and much more. The existence of our congregations, friends, makes a difference that is at times life-saving. And that might be enough of a reason to be part of a UU congregation and to make sure they keep going. But I want us to do more with this precious thing that we call faith. Toward that end, one more story, this time about a Unitarian. In 1927, a young James Luther Adams visited Nuremberg, 1927. That's 6 years after Hitler came to lead the Nazi Party. He wrote that thousands of people of all ages had gathered for the annual Nazi festival. Hitler was leading the moment, but this was 6 years before the party would come into power. Somewhat naively, he asked one of the Germans on the streets what the meaning was of the swastika that he could see all over the place. He knew the meaning, but he was curious what the response would be. The conversation that followed became more and more heated. He told of others joining in as he pressed further, arguing with defenders of Nazism and the Jewish question. And suddenly, he said, I was seized by the elbows from behind and pulled vehemently out of the crowd. No one made an effort to help me. I immediately thought I was being taken into custody. I could not see who it was. After extricating me from the crowd, marched me vigorously down a side street and then turned up an alley. On reaching the dead end of the alley, my host, a young working man in his 30s, wheeled me around and shouted at me, don't you know that when you watch a parade in Germany today, you either keep your mouth shut or you get your head bashed in. Don't be frightened, he said. I have saved you. JLA, as Adams would later be called, along with accolades as a great Unitarian theologian, would continue his studies of theology, prayer, liturgy, and of fascism and its persecution of churches. He would later be arrested and then later survive a harrowing encounter with the Gestapo when caught walking down the street with a deposed Jewish teacher. He wrote of how all of this contributed to the evolution of his social concern. He called this part of his conversion moment. And here is our answer to the question of why. JLA, James Luther Adams, tells of a conversation with the German philosopher Karl Jaspers. He posed a similar question to our why. What did he, Jaspers, deem to be the contemporary significance of liberal Christianity? Jasper's reply, religious liberalism has no significance. It has zwang, no costing commitment. JLA then asked himself if fascism should arise in the States, and just let that sit with you a moment. Should fascism arise in the States, what in your past performance, he's asking himself, would constitute a pattern or framework of resistance? He tells us, his words, I could give only a feeble answer to the question. My principal political activities had been the reading of the newspaper and voting. I had preached sermons on the Depression or in defense of strikers. Occasionally, I uttered protest against censorship in Boston, but I had no adequate conception of citizenship participation. Add to this personal reflection he was having at that time, to the comment that he heard repeatedly from anti-Nazis in Germany. If only, he heard them say, if only 1,000 of us in the late 20s had combined in heroic resistance, we could have stopped Hitler. What followed for JLA was what he called a plunge into voluntary associational activity, concerning himself with race relations, civil liberties, housing inequities, voters' rights, politicking on all levels from ringing doorbells to backroom strategy sessions. His vision of ministry now clear. We don't generally talk about conversion in Unitarian Universalism, but let me leave his story with his words. Let me put it autobiographically and say that in Nazi Germany, I soon came to the question, what is it in my preaching and my political action that would stop this? It is a liberal attitude to say that we keep ourselves informed and read the best papers on these matters, and perhaps join a voluntary association now and then. Also known as, in my words, engage in church, engage in social action now and then. Back to his words. But to be involved with other people so that it costs, and so that one exposes the evils of society, requires something like conversion, something more than an attitude. It requires a sense that there is something wrong and I must be different from the way I have been. So that, my friends, is my answer to why. And I hope you'll join me, I think you're already there, in what JLA called the prophethood of all believers. Side by side we gather, in these temples we build, and we have so much to do. May it be so. Won't you rise now? Oh, wait a minute. Now that I'm reading your order of service, our order of service more clearly, this calls for a moment of silence. And in my 14 years in Marblehead, what I invited us all to do during a moment of silence after I would preach is set intentions. And so for this moment of silence, I invite us to be silent here, but not here and not here, but to think instead, how might we be changed in this moment after sharing this time together? So we will take a moment of silence, but take that question into your heart and soul. knowing that that reflection is probably never quite done, and that is as it should be. I invite you to come out of that silence, join me, rising in body or spirit, and singing. Come sing a song with me. But before the music starts to play, I will tell you that the hymn that best goes, we're going to do two. We're not going to sing two. But I want to tell you that the hymn called I Know I Can is what speaks to this message best. And I'll read just a little bit. Though days be dark with storms and burdens weigh my heart, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. And it ends with, I know we will go on. So now with the heavy task piece of this solidified in our hearts and souls, we turn back to that wonderful welcome we offer everybody and the great feeling that we have as a community that joins together in joy. And now we're going to sing, Come Sing a Song with Me.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll sing you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll sing a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll sing a song of love and the rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Now is the time in our service when we release that flame. As we release it today, I share these words I adapted from a benediction by D. Scott Cooper. As we release this flame of commitment, a symbol of our shared values, remember that the world aches for us to join together and bring about healing, toil for justice, and produce ever-increasing love. This is our calling. Go forth and act accordingly, dear ones. No one else can do our work. Folks, I have some announcements. You received an insert in your order of service today that speaks to our future changes one vote at a time. There's an announcement out in the social hall about opportunities to help make the good trouble that John Lewis spoke of. by helping get out the vote. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of different tasks to be filled. Sign-up sheets are out in the social hall. We hope everyone will participate. They need group leaders and postcard writers to sign up. Chris Lautz also noted that there will be a second Sailor Park picnic coming up on July 20th. Some of you, Sailor Park, you may know, is between Traverse City and Elk Rapids. It's a public boat launch up there, but there's a nice pavilion and a nice picnic area. Mark your calendars and watch the flash and the beacon for more details. Several people have told us in the past that they don't stay for social hours because there's no place to sit. Thanks to the Aging Gracefully groups, a few tables have been set up in the social hall for coffee hour. Please join us there, and don't forget your yellow mugs. Thank you. Let's see, is there anything else that we need to do?
I'm going to do another announcement. Yep. I might. Two more things. One is I do want to add an exclamation point to the work of the Social Action Group, and they left me a postcard that I'm going to hold up. You all got this, right? And on the back, so we need people to sign up. They can go right to the, where's Mike? Right to the social justice table after the service, right? Yes. And do this. Yay, yay, Mike. I've met with them, I've had the pleasure of meeting with them several times, and oh my gosh, who else is on that team? Janet and Mike, look at other people. Who else should be on that team? Everybody, you ready? Who's going to go there and do this? Everybody, right? It's a thing that we can do, but there's much more. The other thing I want to highlight is that we needed to postpone, because we had some twin grandbabies arriving in Massachusetts, the Understanding Racial Justice weekend program. We are offering it on Friday, August 3rd. It's an evening, and then all day Saturday. There should be a publicity going out about it this week. Please sign up, bring friends. It's a really important way to get involved in supporting a change in the conversation here in Northern Michigan. And we're hoping to kickstart a group that might want to then continue along with our BIPOC-led E3 Council in having conversations, monthly conversations about race right here in this space. So please sign up for that. And you can make a whole weekend of it, because I hear Melissa Etheridge is at Interlochen with Jewel. That's Sunday night. It could not be a more perfect weekend. And with that, I'm now going to offer the benediction from one of our Unitarian, I think, heroes. He was blackballed for a while, and that's always a good sign. He was making such good trouble as an abolitionist way back when. Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living. May it be so.